I'm going to I'll try and address a problem today, which is one of the things which I think most besets people in their religious life. It's something which has been a problem for me for many, many years. And it's how do we find God, not just in those moments like just now, when everything around us has conspired to make it easy for us to experience God. But how do we find God when we're at work, when we're waiting in the bank queue, sorry, that's a bank line for you Americans, when we are irritated, when we've just been cut up by somebody driving, when we want to scream our heads off, when we do scream our heads off at somebody, when we are angry, not when we have suppressed all these things, but when they actually happen. When we are in the middle of an argument with our spouse or with our mother or our father, somebody dear to us, with our boss, with our next door neighbor, when everything within us wants to scream at somebody, when the ego calls upon us with every fiber of our being to retaliate, to defend ourselves, to protect ourselves, to put the fence up around ourselves, to get behind the fence, and then to fire over the top of the fence. You see, the secret to finding God, surely, is not suppressing all those occasions so that we become like a saint, more than like a saint, so that we become like some idealized form of Jesus. It is finding God in all those places. Finding God when everything is happening to us. Finding God in our daily routine. Finding God in our daily drudge. So craving God that we are not content just to allow God to pop up once a week on a Sunday. But so craving God that we need God every moment of the day and the night, no matter what we're doing, no matter where we are. Not putting God into such a narrow space that there are only certain times and places that God is allowed to appear. Or that we are so ashamed of most of ourselves that there are only certain places where we can permit God to see us. When we say that back to ourselves, it sounds ridiculous. But this is what we tell ourselves much of the time. We say, oh no, good Lord, well, I don't really want to see God to see me like this. You know, I mean, it's like moments of indignity when somebody's sat upon the lavatory. Or when they're engaged in sexual activity of any variety. People have this idea that all that is closed off to God. That somehow, if we close the door, God can't see it. That God is too much of a gentleman or a gentlewoman to actually peer over the partition and see us at every moment in our life. Well, the truth is that we are never going to be able to live like that idealized form of Jesus. And therefore, unless we are content to invite God in at all moments and at all times, we are going to have to spend an awful lot of our life pretending that we live in a world with no God. And then at certain points, we're content to let God back in again. Well, a lot of that comes from a very peculiar misreading of the Gospels as well. We seem to have this weird idea that Jesus lived a very strange sort of life, that Jesus was not fully human being. That Jesus had the same obsessive disgust of the human body that so many Christians today have, when that's just not true. Many of Jesus' miracles were deeply fleshly. They came from physical fleshly needs. The making of water into wine at Cana of Galilee, the first of the miracles, the first of those signs, the first of those epiphanies which demonstrated to the general public, as it were, that God was miraculously present in Jesus Christ. Now, turning water into wine, you know, a lot of Baptists and Methodists have done a lot of tap dancing over the years to try and suggest that it wasn't wine. Trust me, I've looked at the text, it was wine. Jesus did make a whole bunch of wine. And I had the privilege of preaching on this. The last Sunday I was in London. I was actually up and about, and I was at St Mary Magdalene's, Munster Square, and I did a little calculation. Jesus made about 180 gallons of wine. Wow. Jesus made a whole bunch of wine. And then Jesus made food for people's bellies. Jesus didn't stand there with a wistful look on his face and a sort of halo floating around him, and stand there like a sort of religious object of art so that people could look wistfully at him. Jesus was very God and very man, as the old medieval phrase has it. God robed in flesh. in flesh. Now the word sarx means an awful lot in Scripture. It comes up again and again and again. You can't avoid it. Sarx is not an idealized substance. Sarx really means meat. It is the stuff that we are composed of. It is muscle and bone. Now, this isn't actually what the thrust of my sermon is about, so I don't know where it came from. But it's one of those things that leads us away from accepting that Jesus and God is present in all of our lives. This obsessive disgust of all things physical. We also fail to see ourselves in the true light. And I do. I mean, whenever I preach like this, trust me, it's coming from an appreciation of my failings, and I'm hoping that other people can appreciate the truth in my testimony and see something there. So if ever I say anything like that, you can just bet yourself that it's something I've been through myself, and that it's something I know is a besetting sin with myself. There's a wonderful quote by C.S. Lewis that says, "We do not have a soul, we are a soul. We have a body." Now, the truth behind that, apart from the fact that, yes, I absolutely believe it, is that if then we are a soul, then all things are spiritual. All things are spiritual. There is no division. There is no division. If we try and make a division, we are hoping that our bodies are like some sort of robot that we can set off moving, doing its own thing, whilst we dwell in the spirit. It's nonsense. We are whole human beings, ladies and gentlemen. We are whole human beings. We are not just our bodies, we are not just emotions, we are not just our mind, we are our spirit as well. Now, it's one of those things that comes up whereby it has to be preached and said over and over again, because some of the most profound truths in our spiritual lives we forget again and again and again. Christianity is eternally being called back. And it doesn't take much for us to drift off. When I was in hospital, I was deeply rooted in the presence of the praying and loving people of God here in this place. But it didn't take long not being able to get to church for 2 weeks. Not being able to get to church for 2 weeks before I was trying to do everything myself again. Whereby I was compartmentalizing my life, and I was deciding what I would try and manage without so much of the thought of God. And because so many important things were happening to me, and these were deeply challenging things, for some bizarre reason, I forgot that I was a soul with a body attached, and thought that I was the body to which things were happening. And when I had time, I would start looking at that soul again. That's what brings despair to the whole process of the Christian life. Because it is truly impossible if we set ourselves tasks as individuals which can only truly be done in the presence of God. Because most of us live much of our lives according to a lie. And that lie is that we can hide ourselves from God, that we can shelter ourselves from that omnipotent God. Somebody said something very strange to me whilst I was away, and they said, well, of course, for many people, religion is the way they hide from God. Religion is the way people hide from God. And now this could be a whole bunch of things. I'm not picking on any individual or any denomination, and it applies to us just as much at times. But people hide behind ritual. They hide behind doctrine. They hide behind the Bible sometimes.
That's right.
They hide behind a whole load of things. And it's a way of saying, God cannot do this. And because God cannot do this, then I'm not threatened. I know where my steps can lead me. God does not have the permission to reach into my life and do something truly bizarre, truly strange, or truly challenging, because I don't allow God to. Because I choose the bits of the Bible that says God cannot do this. I choose the bits of my denomination which said God doesn't do that. My religion says God cannot touch me if God so chose and send me flying on my back in a state of grace. Doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. Certainly when I was in the Church of England, if anyone had